French colonialism officially ended decades ago, but its effects are still visible today. Across Africa and the Caribbean, former French colonies continue to experience the political, economic, and cultural consequences of colonial rule. Colonialism was not only about controlling land, it is also about reshaped education, language, identity, and systems of power. During the colonial period, France promoted the idea that French culture and civilization were superior. Colonized people were often pressured to abandon their own traditions and adopt French language and values. This process was known as assimilation. In response to these ideas, black intellectuals from French colonies created the Negritude movement during the 1930s. Negritude rejected colonial racism and celebrated black identity, African culture, and resistance. Thinkers such as Aimé Césaire and Léopold Sédar Senghor became major voices of this movement. In West Africa, French rule deeply influenced education, government, and culture. France tried to create loyal subjects through schools that promoted the French language and European values, while African traditions were often treated as inferior. One important figure connected to this history was Léopold Sédar Senghor. Senghor was a poet, intellectual, and the first president of Senegal after independence. He also became one of the founders of the Negritude movement. Senghor defended African culture and challenged stereotypes that portrayed Africa as backwards or primitive. Through poetry and philosophy, he argued that African traditions and identity had their own values and beauty. However, Senghor's relationship with France also reflected the lasting influence of French rule. Even after Senegal became independent, the country kept strong political and economic ties with France. French remained the official language, and many systems created during the French rule continued to exist. One important example is the CFA franc, a currency still used by 14 African countries today, including Senegal, Ivory Coast, Mali, and Cameroon. Together, these countries have a population of more than 200 million people. The irony is striking. Nations that fought for independence from France still use a currency originally created during the French rule itself. This shows that independence did not completely remove French influence from West Africa. Apparently, West and Central Africa wasn't enough because France also brought its empire to the Caribbean through conquest and slavery. French colonialism also left a deep impact in the Caribbean. Colonial systems in the Caribbean were built on plantation economies and slavery, creating racial power structures and economic dependency that continued long after abolition. One of the most important anti-colonial thinkers from the Caribbean was Aimé Césaire from Martinique. In his famous work, Discourse sur le colonialisme, Césaire argued that colonialism was not a civilized mission, but a system based on exploitation, racism, and violence. Césaire criticized Europe for claiming to represent civilization while committing oppression in its colonies. Martinique remains politically connected to France today as an overseas department. French language, political institutions, and economic systems continue to dominate everyday life. This demonstrates how colonial relationships can continue even after the official colonial period has ended. At the same time, Caribbean intellectuals and writers use literature and culture as a form of resistance. Through movements like Negritude, they defended Black identity and rejected colonial assimilation. The experiences of Martinique and Puerto Rico reveal similarities between French and American colonialism. Martinique remains tied to French, while Puerto Rico remains a territory of the United States. In both places, outside powers continue to influence politics, economics, and identity. Both territories experience economic dependency and debates about self-determination. Many people continue to question whether true independence is possible, while important political and economic decisions remain connected to foreign governments. There are also important differences between the two systems. Martinique became integrated into the French Republic as an overseas department, while Puerto Rico has a different political status under the United States. One important example is political representation. People in Martinique can vote in French presidential elections and elect representatives to French government, while Puerto Ricans cannot vote for the US president unless they live on the mainland. Puerto Rico is considered a US territory, which has created ongoing debates about statehood, independence, and political identity. Even so, both islands continue to reflect the lasting political and cultural influence of colonial rule today. As we've seen, French colonialism continues to shape formerly colonized societies today. Its influence remains visible through language, education, economic systems, political institutions, and even cultural identity. The responses of thinkers like Senghor and Césaire remind us that decolonization was not only political, but also cultural and psychological. Their work challenged colonial ideology and defended the value of Black identity and culture. Even after independence, many structures created before it did not disappear completely. Understanding these lasting effects help us understand that colonialism is not simply part of the past, but also part of the present.